and welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I am Jody, here again with Stephen, and thank you for joining us today. Quick note that by the time this episode drops, it's likely to be the last reminder you get about our t-shirt giveaway. So if you are interested in a Good Stories t-shirt, which are fun, they have our Jolly Dragon on them, check out the link in the episode notes to enter, and we will announce our winner soon. And let's not forget our top 5 new download locations this week, which are Chattanooga, Tennessee, Antigonish, Nova Scotia, hope I said it right, Jacksonville, Florida, I was just there, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Memphis, Tennessee. So we're glad you're here. Thank you for listening. All right, for today's story, I'm excited for this one, brother. This is actually one we talked about doing at the very beginning of our show. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do indeed, because, well, I assumed you were just doing this to humor me because I love this one deeply.
Well, we started it. I started reading it then, way back last year, and I don't know why we switched, but we did do The Ball and the Cross. So this one is by G.K. Chesterton, I should say, and we've done 3 other ones by him so far. So if you're interested in more Chesterton, because they're all delightful and different, we did The Ball and the Cross as our episode 7. We did Man Alive, episode 33. I looked it up. And lastly, The Napoleon of Notting Hill, which is in our season 2, I think, episode 11. And like I said, they are all wildly different, as is this one today from all of those. This is called The Ballad of the White Horse. And I was thinking about it. There are stories that are simply fun, entertaining, fun to read. And then there are stories that tell us something about who we are, who people are. And this one definitely falls into that category of identity. I think it's set in the time of King Alfred the Great, over 1,000 years ago. And it paints a picture of those things that are deeper than words. Things like courage, faith, sacrifice, and the strange way hope can survive even when victory seems impossible. So whether you've loved this poem for years like Stephen, or this is the first time you're hearing it, or like me, I hope we're able to uncover some of the bigger concepts in it, especially the conviction that win or lose, some things are worth the work, worth showing up, and worth fighting for. Time for a story.
England in the 9th century is a land at war. The army of the Danes under King Guthrum has destroyed one kingdom after another, including the kingdom of Wessex, ruled by King Alfred. Despondent and alone, he wanders through the land until he is given a visitation by the Virgin Mary. Our Lady gives him courage, and with renewed hope he gathers the chiefs of England to join him in resisting the invaders. The armies clash at the Battle of Ethandune under the gaze of the ancient geographic marker, the White Horse. The result of this battle will shape the future of England and contribute to Alfred earning the title, the Great.
Very good. So, an age recommendation. What think you?
Oh, that's a hard one because this one totally depends on the person. I think I would have loved having this read to me as early as late elementary school. I think if you're reading it yourself, it's in poetry. It's a ballad form. I think probably high school may be the time you would start to appreciate it if you're trying to read it for yourself. What do you think?
I think to understand what's going on, probably high school, and just some awareness of other texts and things. But yeah, you could read it to a kid, and some of the feeling of it will seep through. You said poetry, but this is a ballad tale, and it is beautiful. Very tragic, but beautiful. Lovely. I was reading it out loud just for the sound of the words, and I don't even love the sound of my own voice. It just sounds great.
This is one that's fun to memorize passages from because, again, they are beautiful when they come out. Almost every book we read, at some point we pause and say, okay, I need to not read all of this because it's all great. This is the one I think I'm going to be the most challenged because I just want to read it out loud beginning to end because the words are great.
Yeah, I actually thought about that. Like, what if we just read a whole chunk and then talk about what it meant? But people might find that tedious. I'm not sure. There is a reading of it by Malcolm Guite. Came out a while ago that I have enjoyed immensely. So look it up, Malcolm Guite, The Ballad of the White Horse, where he does just read through it in pieces, and it's wonderful. Highly recommend.
I found that reading embedded in his podcast. So the Malcolm Guite podcast, I don't think he's doing new episodes for it, but embedded within it, several episodes of that are his reading of this tale. And agree, it is wonderful.
So the spoiler alert, I don't know. This one, anytime we do a book that was written more than 100 years ago, I wonder if we need one.
Mm-hmm. I think
just so
Alfred's
you know.
story is fairly well known. So yeah, we are going to spoil it though.
So Gilbert Keith Chesterton wrote this one, dedicated to his wife, which I find both hilarious and touching. It is the only work he wrote, I believe, dedicated to his wife, Frances, whom I understand he adored. But yeah, he's talking about a figure from history, King Alfred. But this isn't history. It's set inside of history. And Chesterton puts at the very beginning, kind of in mine's called a prefatory note. I've never seen a prefatory note.
GK, he did his own thing.
Like a preface, but it's a prefatory note. Anyway, I got stuck on that. But he comments that he's going with popular legend here. Pop culture about King Alfred, which I just love. He's taking the stories, like we hear stories about King Arthur and, love those stories. I love those stories about King Arthur. Maybe they're not literally true, but they're wonderful stories about him. That's what this is about King Alfred.
I would like to read the first paragraph of the prefatory note.
Do it.
This ballad needs no historical notes for the simple reason that it does not profess to be historical. All of it that is not frankly fictitious, as in any prose romance about the past, is meant to emphasize tradition rather than history. King Alfred is not a legend in the sense that King Arthur may be a legend, that is, in the sense that he may possibly be a lie. But King Alfred is a legend in this broader and more human sense that the legends are the most important things about him. This is a wonderful introduction because so many people object to the historicity or lack thereof of this tale. And I think GK cuts it off right there. He's not trying to be historical. He's writing an epic. And I love this because this is actually a great introduction to epic literature. We have done one so far on the podcast. We've done the Irish Toyne, which still blows my mind that we did that before the Iliad or the Odyssey or the Aeneid or any of the other great epics. But what these epics share are many things, and among them is a lack of historical accuracy. When we read through the Toyne, it was very clear that you couldn't really date it. You couldn't place it to a certain time and place or historical event, but that didn't matter because what it was telling was a traditional story with all sorts of offshoots and spurs that were wonderful and really got to the heart of truth in some ways that history doesn't always do it. We see this a lot with the Iliad. Everyone always complains or talks about, did the Iliad really happen? Did it not really happen? In so many ways, it doesn't matter because the stories that they rolled into it and the story told from it has been so important in his own right. And so, again, I think this is a great way to enter into the world of epic because that's what G.K. Chesterton does with this.
So many different ways I could go with that, brother. For our listeners, if you can't tell already, Stephen is stoked to be talking about this.
Very much.
This is his happy place.
Do you know this is the first G.K. Chesterton I ever read?
No way. How'd you find it?
A class. When I was in college, I took a class, C.S. Lewis and His Circle, and this was the G.K. Chesterton offering. And I've got to say, as a representative work of Chesterton, this ain't very good. If you want to really know the man and what he thought, this is kind of a niche style that he only writes in here. But I loved it. And I've always loved it ever since I read it for the first time.
Everything I found about this ballad says that Chesterton loved it. Like it was one of his favorite things he ever wrote, which is why he dedicated it to his wife, in part anyway. But I, as one who's not read the complete works of Chesterton, which is immense, I don't know why they think that. Was that in his letter somewhere? Do you know?
He spoke about this one and he studied on it for a very long time. I don't have a specific quote to pull out on it, but he definitely did, I think, enjoy this. He loves King Alfred. He loves this period of history and he loves epic. And so it makes sense that he would enjoy this. And I think I can say, again, this is the fourth Chesterton work we've done. And I loved each of the other three. I wouldn't have done them if I didn't enjoy them. This is my favorite G.K. Chesterton work. But again, it's so different from what he normally does. Normally, I'm laughing all the way through Chesterton. This one, I'm crying all the way through it. And it's beautiful.
Agreed. You've said the word epic now several times, which I think connotation suggests long. This is not long at all. It's actually very, very short. I read it 3 times in preparing for this, and I didn't even have a lot of time to read. So not epic in terms of length of words, length of text. Epic in the scope. I don't know. How are you applying the word epic to this?
In terms of flavor and tone and style, it's epic in the sense that this is a great battle and a great struggle between 2 forces. That's epic, and many of the other epics have that as well, whether it's the Toyne or the Iliad or what have you. The other way I would apply it is the nature of the language. It's a poem. It's a long poem, but not long like the Iliad is long. Longer than a limerick, I would say.
It is much longer than a limerick. It's a low bar.
The other way I apply the term epic has to do with what I was hinting at earlier, where he does meld and blend history to tell a story. There's a great quote at the end of the prefatory note, and let me read this one. Like I say, I'm going to have a hard time not just reading this entire work. One other consideration needs a note. Alfred has come to us in the best way, that is, by national legends, solely for the same reason as Arthur and Roland and other giants of that darkness, because he fought for the Christian civilization against the heathen nihilism. But since this work was really done by generation after generation, by the Romans before they withdrew, and by the Britons while they remained, I have summarized this first crusade in a triple symbol and given to a fictitious Roman, Celt, and Saxon a part in the glory of Ethandune. I fancy that, in fact, Alfred's Wessex was of very mixed bloods, but in any case, it is the chief value of legend to mix up the centuries while preserving the sentiment, to see all ages in a sort of splendid foreshortening. That is the use of tradition. It telescopes history. I love that. The value of legend to mix up the centuries while preserving the sentiment. To see all ages in a sort of splendid foreshortening. I think that's what this does, and in that way, this is epic.
All right. Are you ready to move to the dedication?
Yes.
He's hesitant.
Well, I'm trying to decide whether we should do that next or whether we should actually talk about history. But yeah, let's start with Frances because she is wonderful.
Yeah, the dedication is to his wife, but in the same tone and poetry of the rest of this book. And it is beautiful. Again, I want to just read it to you, but I took out a couple snippets. So he's describing what the book is going to be about. And I took of a good king on an island that ruled once on a time. And as he walked by an apple tree, there came green devils out of the sea, with sea plants trailing heavily and tracks of opal slime. I think that stanza is so brilliant, where it's a king with an apple tree. So simple. I mean, it's a king at peace, and then this twisting with the green devils coming out of the sea, and the phrase opal slime. So good. That will stick with me forever. But he also talks about memory, a trip he and his wife took to these places. The White Horse Vale, the White Horse, is a thing in Britain if you don't know. It's this massive horse on a hill made out of white chalk, and you have to maintain that, and they got to see it. And here he's putting a story around that, contextualized with history. It is so cool and so brilliant.
A few other quotes. Yet Alfred is no fairy tale, his days as our days ran. He also looked forth for an hour on peopled plains and skies that lower from those few windows in the tower that is the head of a man. And then the next one is very interesting in terms of his own history and his relationship to Frances. Therefore, I bring these rhymes to you, who brought the cross to me. Mm-hmm. Frances was the religious one of the two of them. They were just a couple that you just want to hang out with. They loved each other deeply. Chesterton, GK, was insane. She was the sane one. grounded him, but supported him and loved him. And he was vaguely religious growing up, but she was staunchly so. And it was she who introduced him truly to Jesus, to the Trinitarian God. And it's interesting because she followed him into Catholicism, but not right away. I think she was received some 6 years after he was received. And so it's just, she had a personality. She had her own nature. And I love her, and I love the expression here of the gratitude, who brought the cross to me.
Yeah, and it's evident through this, the richness of his faith as he's, kind of projecting himself and the battles fought by Alfred. You can feel it throughout this, even though there's tragedy. If I understand correctly, and we've talked more about the man, Chesterton, in other episodes, which is why we're kind of summarizing him quickly here, but I think it's true that he never considered being a Christian a promise of an easy life. It doesn't mean it's all roses. It's not just the king and the apple tree, but there are deep and wonderful things worth fighting for, as I said earlier, and that is so represented in this story.
All right, well, let's get into the Anglo-Saxon days of England. How exciting is this? Because this is something that, I don't know, growing up, I didn't know anything about it. I knew a fair amount about Arthur. I had heard a little bit about kind of the high medieval ages, but this is that in-between. That time where I thought nothing exists, where I thought there was no history, we just didn't know. Heathen kings and small kingdoms and everything was dirt and filth and squalor. Could not have been more wrong. This is the age of the Anglo-Saxon kings. And let's do just a brief walk through the history of Britain. So Britain became Christian early on. And when Rome became Christian, there were already Christians in Britain, and Britain then became Roman Christian. When Rome fell, think 410 or around that time, Christianity left in many ways the Isle of Britain. It was still there in certain pockets and places, but it became essentially a heathen and a pagan kingdom again, and did not really become Christianized again until the Irish were converted. St. Patrick did his great work, and then the Irish came over and converted the island. At that time, it wasn't really the British, though. It was the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes and these other really northern nations who had settled into the land of Britain. All of a sudden, you don't have the British anymore. You have the English. The British were still around, but in many cases they were in conflict with the English. But these English were now Roman Christian as opposed to the British Christian that were there before. And it is these Anglo-Saxon communities that formed into the great kingdoms. Many of these names we've heard about. Northumbria, Mercia, Essex, Sussex, Wessex. And Wessex is going to be the main kingdom here, because what then happened is pretty much all these kingdoms failed except for Wessex. Wessex was able to somehow scratch out a survival, and this is where Alfred comes onto the scene. Alfred was the youngest son of King Ethelwulf. Nobody thought he was going to reign because he had 3 older brothers. Well, they died. And then Alfred took the throne. He is the only native-born English monarch to be labeled the Great, to have that moniker. And it is true that throughout history there are a lot of kings and queens labeled the Great who probably don't deserve it, but I think Alfred deserved it, and the historians I listen to and read all agree with that as well. He did a pilgrimage to Rome as a small child. He was said to have been confirmed into Christianity by the Pope himself. And so he had deep ties to his faith. But what really, really made him impressive, and I think made him in history, is what's going to be touched on in this passage, was his defense of England against the Danes. The Danes, who were pagan and heathen, coming in to conquer it, and Alfred managed to defeat them, and he actually had their main king baptized. And the kingdom of Wessex then rose, and he did a lot of stuff after that, a lot with education, a lot with learning. He is often credited with being the founder of the Royal Navy because he started things like shipbuilding. He did all sorts of administrative changes. Incredible man, and that's who we're going to approach in this work.
That was excellent, brother. I knew some of that, but I intentionally didn't go look it up because I knew you would.
Oh, I'm so excited. And so I think we should just start with the very beginning. Before the gods that made the gods had seen their sunrise pass, the white horse of the White Horse Vale was cut out of the grass.
Like Stephen, I marked a lot of segments here, so know that there's more that we're not reading. I promise we're skipping some. But it's hard to summarize because the words are so beautiful. So I marked age beyond age on British land, eons on eons gone, was peace and war in western hills, and the white horse looked on. For the white horse knew England when there was none to know. He saw the first or break or bend. He saw heaven fall and the world end. Oh God, how long ago? So from the beginning, you get this concept of how we're looking backwards in time at this time before now, at this people before now. And all along, the white horse was there. It was a thing. It was present long ago and still today.
And I love how Chesterton does this because what he's doing is he's making it clear to us as readers where we stand in the sweep of history. These are incredible events that are happening in this story. But when they're gone and forgotten, the white horse will still be there. Again, Britain was gone. This was now England. And the white horse was there before Britain and will be there after the Anglo-Saxons and is still there to this day. And so embedding it in this sweep of history is wonderful. And I think the other thing that this makes clear is he's not trying to argue for the supremacy or the greatness of the Anglo-Saxon kings. He's not trying to take us back to Alfred's day. What he is trying to describe here is a heroic and noble event set in this greater sweep of history.
That did change things. And I love this because it puts a line in the sand. For the end of the world was long ago, and all we dwell today like children of some second birth, like a strange people left on earth after a judgment day. This poem is about that judgment day.
And the judgment are the Northmen who descend upon him. The Northmen came about our land, a Christless chivalry, who knew not of the archer pen, great, beautiful, half-witted men from the sunrise and the sea. Misshapen ships stood on the deep, full of strange gold and fire, and hairy men as huge as sin, with horned heads, came wading in through the long, low sea mire. I wanted to read that passage because it's great, but also because this is an example of how historians can really kind of look down on this work. Right? If your goal is to be technically accurate about the historical truth of the time, we now know that no Vikings wore horned helmets, and people will tell you that with great pride and great condescension. Doesn't matter. The imagery is beautiful.
And the alliteration.
Yes.
There's a lot of H's in that stanza. I noticed.
Alliteration is so important with Anglo-Saxon poetry, and so I love that he tried to put some of that in.
Mm. So he's describing the Danes, the Northmen coming onto land. It says, our towns were shaken of tall kings with scarlet beards like blood. The world turned empty where they trod. They took the kindly cross of God and cut it up for wood. Their gods were sadder than the sea, gods of a wandering will, who cried for blood like beasts at night, sadly from hill to hill. Immediately, the impression is this is not a happy people. This is a conquering people. They are there to force their will and their dominion on this land. And somewhere in here it says, meanwhile, Alfred is hiding in deep grass, and he hardens his heart with hope.
That line, their gods were sadder than the sea. So true. It just so well put.
So at this time, Alfred is a king, but kind of a king without an army. Right now, he's wandering alone in a place called Athelney, and he's still a king. He has a kingship, but he sees this army coming. And he is alone. It's important to remember that because he has to go gather people to fight, people who believe like he does, but it's not the first thing he does.
No, no. And you're right. He is alone here. In the island in the river, he was broken to his knee, and he writ with an iron pen, that God had wearied of Wessex men, and given their country field and fen to the devils of the sea. So he is so worried here that he's been forgotten, that his people have been forgotten, that God is allowing this to happen. But then it moves on. He's talking about a picture of Mary and the child Christ. It was wrought in the monk's slow manner from silver and sanguine shell, where the scenes are little and terrible, keyholes of heaven and hell. That just speaks to the way he thinks of these things. This is the way he thinks of icons and images and these tools for remembering the divine, keyholes of heaven and hell. And he's looking at one and, well, things happen.
Says he looked, and there Our Lady was. She stood and stroked the tall live grass as a man strokes his steed. Her face was like an open word when brave men speak and choose. The very colors of her coat were better than good news. She spoke not, nor turned not, nor any sign she cast. Only she stood up. Mary, the Mother of God, stands in front of him. She stood up straight and free between the flowers in Athelney and the river running past.
And he asked her a question. Mother of God, the wanderer said, I am but a common king, nor will I ask what saints may ask to see a secret thing. The gates of heaven are fearful gates, worse than the gates of hell. Not I would break the splendors barred, or seek to know the thing they guard, which is too good to tell. But for this earth most pitiful, this little land I know, if that which is forever is, or if our heart shall break with bliss, seeing the stranger go. He wants to know if they're going to survive, if they're going to win. And again, the humility of him. He's just a common king. He's not a saint, but he still has a question, and he gets to ask it.
I love how it's presented, though. He's not going to ask about the things above. He understands that's too great for him. Very humble man. But he says, this piece of earth where I've been, will we see our enemy flee? Will we win? And she does not answer. She does not answer the question.
But her words are beautiful. The gates of heaven are lightly locked. That phrase occurs over and over, and every time I love it because it's always followed by something beautiful. The gates of heaven are lightly locked. We do not guard our gain. The heaviest hind may easily come silently and suddenly upon me in a lane. Or later, the gates of heaven are lightly locked. We do not guard our gold. Men may uproot where worlds begin, or read the name of the nameless sin. But if he fail or if he win, to no good man is told. And then she speaks about Christians. She speaks about believers. And as you said earlier, G.K. Chesterton never thought Christianity was a ticket to an easy life. But it is an indicator of a great life. The men of the East may spell the stars, and times and triumphs mark. But the men signed of the cross of Christ go gaily in the dark. The men of the East may search the scrolls for sure fates and fame, but the men that drink the blood of God go singing to their shame. It is just so good. But she also, kind of chastises them too. But you all, and the kind of Christ, are ignorant and brave, and you have wars you hardly win, and souls you hardly save. Again, these are just great lines to memorize and ponder and think about and dwell on. But then she actually gives her answer. I tell you not for your comfort, yea, not for your desire, save that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher.
Night shall be thrice night over you, and heaven an iron cope. Do you have joy without a cause, yea, faith without a hope? So there's a lot in there. The gates of heaven are lightly locked. It is one of the most beautiful phrases I have ever heard in my life. And He says, "Don't tell me about those things. I'm too small for those. Don't even tell me." But that's what she speaks about. The gates of heaven are lightly locked. She talks about a little maid who can walk in and basically observe the conversation of God and the Son and the Spirit together. Like, the gates of heaven are lightly locked. Those mysteries aren't far away. But she does refuse to foretell the future. She's not a fortune teller. She's not here to say, you're going to win, you're going to lose. He doesn't get to know. But she does give him that hope of the gates of heaven are lightly locked. Faith without a hope? No, there is hope there in what she gives him. And it's interesting that the phrase that sticks with Alfred, because he uses it later, the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. It's going to get worse. This is getting worse, not better. There's not going to be some miracle right now where you don't have to fight for what you hold. No, the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. But there is hope because the gates of heaven are lightly locked, and the circle of it is beautiful. I love all of it. And she talks about the things above, the night above. But at the end of this book ends where Alfred, he's looking up at Mary as she's speaking to him. And then he looks back towards earth, and it says, he, Alfred, only heard the heathen men, whose eyes are blue and blind, singing what shameful things are done between the sunlit sea and the sun, when the land is left behind. He has a vision of Mary, giving him comfort but not answers, giving him hope but no answers. But it ends with these heathen men singing of their dirty deeds. That's where the book ends. Or that's where the chapter ends.
Yeah, the first book, as in many cases, when we say book, we mean chapter on this one. Yeah, I love that endlessly. As you said, some of the most beautiful lines in all of English literature I've ever come across. And then the fact, though, that gives him hope. That this stern, strong warning inspires him and brings him out of the doldrums of the swamp. It's just fantastic. And I'm going to do a little digression here because I love this book and I can't help it. We have just been talking about a visitation of the Virgin Mary. To some people, that is going to be a problem. If you are Catholic, it's not a problem at all. This makes sense. This is a thing. But if you are not, I am not Catholic, you have to come to terms with this on some level. And I think one of the best ways of approaching this is, like many things, going to come to us from the words of C.S. Lewis. This is out of his introduction to Mere Christianity, where he's talking about the things that he addresses in that work and how he really avoided a lot of things that could potentially have gotten in the way of what he was trying to say. And then I'll just read this. Some people draw unwarranted conclusions from the fact that I never say more about the Blessed Virgin Mary than is involved in asserting the virgin birth of Christ. But surely my reason for not doing so is obvious. To say more would take me at once into highly controversial regions, and there is no controversy between Christians which needs to be so delicately touched as this. The Roman Catholic beliefs on that subject are held not only with the ordinary fervor that attaches to all sincere religious belief, but, very naturally, with the peculiar and, as it were, chivalrous sensibility that a man feels when the honor of his mother or his beloved is at stake. It is very difficult so to dissent from them you will not appear to them a cad as well as a heretic. And, contrariwise, the opposed Protestant beliefs on this subject call forth feelings which go down to the very roots of all monotheism whatsoever. To radical Protestants, it seems that the distinction between creator and creature, however holy, is imperiled, that polytheism is risen again. Hence, it is hard so to dissent from them that you will not appear something worse than a heretic, a pagan. What I like about this description is I think it gives a strong argument for both sides. Not that you need to believe one side or the other, because he doesn't make that argument here, but to understand what the other side sees. And so for people to whom the Virgin Mary as a symbol, a representative of the divine is problematic, I encourage you to think about it from that chivalrous aspect and to enjoy this poem in that light.
For me, the the phrase from the Bible that Mary hid these things and pondered them in her heart? Chesterton uses or refers to that line here at the end of one of her stanzas when she's talking about how the gates of heaven being lightly locked, and any little maid that walks in good thoughts apart may break the guard of the three kings and see the dear and dreadful things I hid within my heart. And if you are a Christian and a Bible believer, that applies to you regardless of what you think about praying to Mary.
King Alfred is strengthened, he is inspired, and he now goes out. The king went gathering Christian men as wheat out of the husk. Eldred, the franklin by the sea, and Mark, the man from Italy, and Colin of the sacred tree from the old tribe on Usk. And so here he gives that outline of who the chiefs are going to be. And as we learned in the introductory note, this is basically his way of bringing in all these different threads that helped fight paganism in Britain and England, even though the army like this wasn't actually historically there.
So this chapter is called The Gathering of the Chiefs. And I actually love the first bit of it, where it's describing Alfred after he's received this visitation, but heard the heathens sing, where he says that he's shaken of the joy of giants, the joy without a cause. And he goes and washes his soul in the west wind and his body in the sea. He is reinvigorated, and he cleanses himself physically as well as he goes to speak to these chiefs, these leaders, who I always get the sense he knows they won't want to come. This is he has to convince them that they have a reason to leave their homes and come fight. But I will tell you, when I first read this is where I got a little overwhelmed, because he's describing Eldred the Franklin, Mark the Italian, Golden of the Sacred Tree. Who? I didn't know who they were, and that was overwhelming to me, knowing that these are three representative peoples. So it's representing peoples who did fight in history, and kind of that, what does he say, telescoping of history, pushing them together into this mixed band, and these are the representative leaders. And yeah, the names themselves really overwhelmed me at the first time.
Understandable.
I'll just say that right now.
The first one he goes to seek is Eldred. And Eldred is he's the Anglo-Saxon, right? He's the Englishman. He's the farmer. He's this ruddy and jovial guy that Alfred goes to first. And this makes sense. And the description is great. A mighty man was Eldred, a bulk for cast to fill, his face a dreaming furnace, his body a walking hill. In the old wars of Wessex, his sword had sunken deep, but all his friends, he sighed and said, were broken about Ethelred, and between the deep drink and the dead, he had fallen upon sleep. So this is a soldier of the wars. This is an Englishman who fought with the previous kings that are now dead, and he's given up hope. I mean, between deep drink and sleep, I mean, he's just not going anywhere. He's not doing anything other than living on his farm, eating and living for the moment.
There's a lot of mention of his ale. People like his ale, but he is an old warrior, and he's tired and sad. He says, "Come not to me, King Alfred, save always for the ale. Why should my harmless hinds be slain? Because the chiefs cry once again, as in all fights that we shall gain, and in all fights we fail."
And I love that Alfred doesn't really try and persuade him. Remember, it wasn't persuasion that inspired Alfred. It was this, and what inspired him he shares. Out of the mouth of the Mother of God, like a little word come I. For I go gathering Christian men from sunken paving and fort and fen to die in battle God knows when. By God, but I know why. And this is the word of Mary, the word of the world's desire. No more of comfort shall ye get, save that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher.
And then there's silence. If you come, we're meeting at the woodman's hut, hewn under Egbert's stone. So he knows where to go and when, if he shows up to fight.
Then silence sank, and slowly arose the sea landlord. Like some vast beast for mystery, he filled the room and porch and sky, and from a cobweb nail on high, unhooked his heavy sword. Eldred will be at the stone.
But that is only one of our 3 chiefs. He has more visits to make.
If Eldred represents England, the Anglo-Saxons, the next one is Mark of Italy. This is the remnant of Rome in Britain. A bronzed man with a bird's bright eye and strong bird's beak and brow. His skin was brown with buried gold, and of certain of his sires was told that they came in the shining ship of old with Caesar in the prow. And so this is a man with heritage. This is a man who has been there for a long, long time. But again, he's been burned. He's seen war. He has seen failure. And at this point, he's really only interested in his vines. He's interested in the wine, which, how fitting is that that's associated with Italy?
This did make me laugh. All the kings of the earth drank ale, but he, Marcus, drank wine. It says his soul remembers Rome. So at this point, Rome is gone, has peaked, has fallen. But Marcus is still of Rome, and his soul remembers it. But then Alfred of the Lonely Spear lifted his lion head and fronted with the Italian's eye, asking him of his whence and why. King Alfred stood and said, I am that oft-defeated king, whose failure fills the land, who fled before the Danes of old, who chaffered with the Danes with gold, who now upon the Wessex wold hardly has feet to stand. But out of the mouth of the Mother of God, I have seen the truth like fire, this, that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher.
But it doesn't seem like Marcus is convinced. It doesn't seem like he's going to go. But then we get another line from Alfred. If each man on the judgment day meet God on a plain alone, said Alfred, I will speak for you as for myself and call it true, that you brought all fighting folk you knew lined under Egbert stone. Alfred knows he's going to come, even if Marcus doesn't yet.
So that's 2 of our 3 chieftains. The third one is the Celt, the Irishman, and they are depicted really as these outlaws. The Druids are mentioned, and just the passion for the seas, and the ghosts of fallen kings are mentioned. Just the rich description of each of these chieftains, fantastic.
And these are some lines I've actually read before on this podcast, but I'm going to do it again because I love them. This is the description of Colin the Celt. Last of a race in ruin, he spoke the speech of the Gaels. His kin were in holy Ireland, or up in the crags of Wales. But his soul stood with his mother's folk, that were of the rain-wrapped isle, where Patrick and Brandon Westerly looked out at last on a landless sea, and the sun's last smile. His harp was carved in cunning, as the Celtic craftsman makes, graven all over with twisting shapes like many headless snakes. His harp was carved in cunning, his sword prompt and sharp, and he was gay when he held the sword, sad when he held the harp. For the great Gaels of Ireland are the men that God made mad, for all their wars are merry, and all their songs are sad. He kept the Roman order, he made the Christian sign, but his eyes grew often blind and bright, and the sea that rose in the rocks at night rose to his head like wine.
I personally he heard the noise of a nameless sea on an undiscovered isle. The stanzas in this are just the most beautiful, and they tell the story better than just mere sentences could do. Excellent.
And this exchange with Colin is, I think, my favorite of the 3, because Alfred is again speaking to him. I am Alfred of Wessex, and I am a conquered king. And the man of the cave made answer, and his eyes were stars of scorn. And better kings were conquered, or ever your sires were born. What goddess was your mother? What fay your breed begot, that you should not die with Uther and Arthur and Lancelot? But when you win, you brag and blow, and when you lose, you rail. Army of Eastland yokels, not strong enough to fail. That is so good. This idea that it's not just winning. That doesn't make you better. It certainly doesn't make you right. And the strength of these that have fallen and been defeated. It's so good, and I love thinking about that.
Well, the pride in it, the pride in the history of fallen kings.
But again, Alfred has his answer. I bring not boast or railing, spake Alfred, not in ire. I bring of Our Lady a lesson set, this, that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher.
Then Cullen of the sacred tree tossed his black mane on high, and cried as rigidly he rose, and if the sea and sky be foes, we will tame the sea and sky. Undaunted.
Great heart. Great heart. And so now Alfred has recruited his chiefs, and he leaves them all and goes to wait for them by the stone.
The next book, next chapter, is called The Harp of Alfred. And several times reading this, I thought, I did not see that coming. This is one of those times. King Alfred takes off his sword and picks up his harp, and he goes for a walk. He says he goes unarmed over the hills with his harp upon his arm, until he came to the White Horse Vale and saw across the plains, in the twilight high and far and fell, like the fiery terraces of hell, the campfires of the Danes. He walks into the enemy camp. They basically bring him along to play some songs. The man is carrying a harp.
Clearly a minstrel. Yeah, and this is so much fun for me because really when you think about the folklore around Alfred, there are a couple of classic pieces and they all find their place in this poem. And this is really the first one, this playing the harp in the camp of the Danes. And when he arrives, it is quite the scene. For golden in the firelight, with a smile curved on his lips, and a beard curled right cunningly, was Guthrum of the northern sea, the emperor of the ships. With 3 great earls King Guthrum went on the rounds from fire to fire, with Harold, nephew of the king, an Ogier of the stone and sling, an elf whose gold lute had a string that sighed like all desire. So in the same way, with Alfred and his 3 chiefs, we have a representation of what's going on there on the Christian side in Christian history. Here, with Guthrum, the king, we have 3 of his earls who are a representation of different aspects of the pagan host that's coming to conquer and to kill and to destroy.
Interesting to me, when Alfred walks up, they're encamped on the White Horse Down. He sees the White Horse, which is part of the landscape. And it says, the great white horse was gray, for it was ill scoured of the weed, and lichen and thorn could crawl and feed, since the foes of settled house and creed had swept old works away. The white horse has to be maintained to stay white, or things grow on it. Weeds and lichen, they diminish the color of the chalk on the hill. And he notices that it's dirty. They've tainted it. They've let it be overgrown. They don't care about this place. But yes, he's in the camp with these 3 leaders. And I can't remember, does he sing first?
Yeah, they ask him to play, and he sings an old song. He sings a song of Britain, interestingly, of an old raid he talks about. And he sings it well, but it's not what they're ready to listen to. And so these earls then take turns snatching the harp from him and singing their own songs and basically speaking their own philosophy. And Chesterton uses this as a wonderful tool to explain where each of the earls come from. And the first one is Harold. So this is the nephew of the king. And his song is all about battle and conquest and weakening. And he talks about how the acceptance of Christ weakened these people. Well, here it is. Doubtless your sires were sword swingers when they waded fresh from foam, before they were turned to women by the god of the nails from Rome. But since you bent to the shaven men who neither lust nor smite, thunder of Thor, we hunt you, a hare on the mountain height. And so this is Harold's view of the Anglo-Saxons. They were tough once when they came in and conquered, but then they submitted to this pale god who allowed himself to be killed. And the shaven men, the priests, neither lust nor smite. There's just nothing here. And this is Harold's view. They can conquer them because they're easy to conquer.
And this nephew of the king the enemy king, we should say. He's very boastful, very big ego, bragging. And the enemy king, Guthrum, he actually rebukes him a little bit. He says, "It is enough, nephew. Let the elf retune the string. Let somebody else sing something a little gentler, not so rough."
An elf, I mean, just the word, right? Elf. This is a man basically from Germany. It talks about him being from the land of folk lands. Blue-eyed was Elf the minstrel, with womanish hair and ring, yet heavy was his hand on sword, though light upon the string. So this is really a minstrel. He can play incredible and beautiful things. And they felt the land of the folk song spread southward of the Dane, and they heard the good Rhine flowing in the heart of all Allemagne. They felt the land of the folk songs where the gifts hang on the tree, where the girls give ale at morning and the tears come easily. The mighty people, woman-like, that have pleasure in their pain, as he sang of Balder beautiful, whom the heavens loved in vain. So whereas Harold, Thor is the picture, power, strength, might. With Elf, Balder is the picture, beauty, but beauty that dies, beauty that cannot last. So it's equally as depressing, but just in a different way.
Just the sadness that comes across with this tune from Elf. So there is always a thing forgotten when all the world goes well, a thing forgotten as long ago when the gods forgot the mistletoe, and soundless as an arrow of snow, the arrow of anguish fell. The end of the next line is, "There's always a forgotten thing, and love is not secure." They have no hope. That first guy's just this boastful jerk. This guy's just crushed and devastated and hopeless. And that's the songs they sing around the campfire. That's what's being communicated about their beliefs, about why they're even here.
But it gets worse because there's another one, and this is the third Earl. This is Ogier. And all that sat by the fire were sad, save Ogier, who was stern, and his eyes hardened even to stones as he took the harp in turn. Earl Ogier of the stone and sling was awed to hear in sight. Old he was, but his locks were red, and jests were all the words he said, yet he was sad at board and bed, and savage in the fight. And then his philosophy is really, really dark, because he talks about the wrath of the gods behind the gods, who would rend all gods and men. Well, if the old man's heart hath still wheel sped of rage and roaring will, like cataracts to break down and kill, well for the old man then. All there is destruction. All there is despair. But what can men do but join in with the destruction, with the hate, the cruelty, and killing? In so many ways, what we see here is something we saw in Charles Williams' War in Heaven, when we had the gathering of the bad guys at the end, and each of them had a philosophy. We see those similar philosophies here, and it's really, really well done. But we're not done yet, because there's one left who has not yet spoken his philosophy, and this is the king. This is Guthrum. And you that sit by the fire are young, and true loves wait for you. But the king and I grow old, and hate alone is true. This was Ogier, and then the king responds, I am older than you, Ogier, not all things would I rend, for whether life be bad or good, it is best to abide the end.
It is good to sit where the good tales go, to sit as our father sat. But the hour shall come after his youth, when a man shall know not tales but truth, and his heart fail thereat.
But this is where he takes his philosophy. And the heart of the locked battle is the happiest place for men, when shrieking souls as shafts go by, and many have died, and all may die. Though this word be a mystery, death is most distant then. Death blazes bright above the cup and clear above the crown, but in that dream of battle we seem to tread it down. Wherefore I am a great king, and waste the world in vain, because man hath not other power, save that in dealing death for dower, he may forget it for an hour, to remember it again. King Guthrum knows everyone's going to die. he's going to die. And the only way he can forget about it is to be drunk on battle, to kill others and somehow make his own death seem distant. It is so incredibly futile. There is no way that's going to work, but that is his philosophy. And Alfred has heard enough. He cannot stand this anymore because this is all just ridiculous. And I love, this is my single favorite line from the entire work. What have the strong gods given? Where have the glad gods led? When Guthrum sits on a hero's throne and asks if he is dead. Their philosophy leads to nothing. Guthrum has it all. He's a king. He's a hero. He's mighty. He's courageous. And he's just trying to forget about death. Wonders if he's already dead. Whereas Alfred speaks in incredible poetry here what his faith gives him and what Christianity can do for him. And that even hunted, even harassed, even killed, he's richer than Guthrum.
When God put man in a garden, he girt him with a sword and sent him forth a free knight that might betray his Lord. But though I lie on the floor of the world with the 7 sins for rods, I would rather fall with Adam than rise with all your gods. On you is fallen the shadow and not upon the name, that though we scatter and though we fly, and you hang over us like the sky, you are more tired of victory than we are tired of shame. Oh man, that is chilling and a very bold song to sing in this camp of enemies. But he goes there.
He goes there, and they laugh.
Yes.
And the king with harp on shoulder stood up and ceased his song, and the owls moaned from the mighty trees, and the Danes laughed loud and long. The episode of Alfred in the camp, I don't care if it ever happened, I will always remember that passage. Well, I said earlier that there's several points in Alfred's life that are just kind of known as folklore. The first one is him playing the harp in the camp of the Danes. The second one is the burning of the cakes. And that's where we move into now with the next book, The Woman in the Forest.
Alfred is on his way to the meeting location, the hut. But he's dressed in rags and carrying a harp. He looks like a beggar. And on the way there, he bumps into this woman cooking cakes on a fire. And she takes pity on him. And she tells him that he can eat if he'll watch the fire so that her cakes don't burn. She takes pity on him, not knowing he's the king. And so he sits and watches the fire.
And the woman with the woman's eyes of pity at once and ire said, when that she had glared a span, there is a cake for any man if he will watch the fire. He doesn't do a very good job watching.
He's thinking, man, this is poetry. And he just sang his song to the enemy. And he's thinking about wisdom. It says, wise he had been before defeat and wise before success. Wise in both hours and ignorant, knowing neither more nor less. So wisdom doesn't mean foresight. He still doesn't know what will happen. He doesn't know what to do. And he's thinking about this woman. He takes pity on her as well. He knows he's the king, and he thinks about her fate. And this whole time, he even sees a spark in the fire, an ember pops, and that makes him think. But the cakes get away from him because he's busy in his mind, and he burns them. He lets them burn.
And as he wept for the woman, he let her business be. And like his royal oath and rash, the good food fell upon the ash and blackened instantly. Screaming, the woman caught a cake, yet burning from the bar, and struck him suddenly on the face, leaving a scarlet scar. And I love this next passage. King Alfred stood up wordless, a man dead with surprise, and torture stood in the evil things that are in the childish hearts of kings, an instant in his eyes. Isn't that great? They're in the childish hearts of kings. So his first response is, revenge. You don't do that to a king. And kings tend to respond in rather unsavory ways when such things happened, but it was only in his eyes for an instant. And what's really funny is as he's standing there, all the chiefs show up. This poor woman.
And then Alfred sees the joke, and you know what? Instead of responding in anger, he laughs. On this edge of battle, he hears his men coming. He laughs as this woman who just struck him in the face and left a mark. He laughs with joy. So the Danes had laughed at his song with scorn. He laughs with joy here. And humility. He had just been in his mind thinking about how God too is a servant. And I do want to read a couple of those lines. It says, "But some see God like Guthrum, crowned with a great beard curled. But I see God like a good giant that laboring lifts the world. Wherefore was God in Golgotha, slain as a serf is slain, and hate he had of prince and peer, and love he had and made good cheer of them that, like this woman here, go powerfully in pain." There is so much just in those two stanzas. I feel like you could write a whole book about him, but that he thinks of God like a good giant working, lifting the world, literally the weight of the world on God's shoulders, but he's working for his people. Even though Alfred's sitting here dressed as a beggar and being pitied by a woman who has nothing. And yet he can see that God too is a servant. And that's what he remembers as she slaps it after she slaps him. Takes him an instant, but he gets there.
"Now here is a good warrant," cried Alfred, "by my sword, for he that is struck for an ill servant should be a kind lord. He that has been a servant knows more than priests and kings, but he that has been an ill servant, he knows all earthly things." I've thought a lot about this passage over time, and again, this is one of the ones that people tend to know about Alfred, burning the cakes. This actually shows up in the Great British Bake Off. There are times when Paul refers to, well, that's an Alfred cake, meaning it's just burned.
That's so true. I never put it together. That's awesome.
Yep. This is the passage
I
for
get
that.
it.
I've often wondered, there's a lot of argument about whether this really happened. I mean, again, historians are no fun. They'll deny this all the time. It only first shows up something like 300 years after the death of Alfred, but it's such a good story. But what really is the lesson from it? I've wondered about this a lot. The best that I can come up with is, one, it is a picture of Alfred's humility, that he doesn't torture the woman. But two, the concept that you can get so lost in kind of big things in your own thoughts that you forget about the work in front of you. That it's important to be diligent about small things in front of you and not forget that when you're thinking about other things. Were there any other lessons you took out of it? That's the best I've been able to come up with.
I think the parallel to Christ coming as a servant is clearly depicted in this. And so he's thinking about having that awareness of how his people live. Okay, it's not just these high people. It's not just the kings and the chieftains. There's real people living, and it's hard for them. You know, if the Danes come overrun them, it's going to be harder for them, right? The seas are rising higher. But here his men do show up. I think it is interesting, though, because he's talking about these things. He says, "For I am the first king known of heaven that has been struck like a slave." I wrote, "Not so." He was literally just thinking about Christ coming to us.
Yep. Good point.
Nope.
I do wonder, too, one of the things King Alfred is known for, and we've spoken about this, is that he did a translation of Boethius, the Consolation of Philosophy. And we've spoken about this quite a bit, that idea of the Wheel of Fortune. And I wonder if there's some component of that as well. Here in this state, functioning as a servant, he didn't perform well. He has been struck. The wheel is low at this point. And maybe there is some indicator that if we think about that, can only go up.
So good news. If you have a low day, it's going to come back around.
Right.
As he hears these men approaching, though, he says, "Up on the old white road, brothers, up on the Roman walls, for this is the night of the drawing of swords, and the painted tower of the heathen hordes leans to our hammers, fires, and cords, leans a little, and falls." And I wrote, "Go time" on mine. They are ready to go. It is happening.
This is the battle. And Chesterton refers to this as Ethandune, Ethandune. If you're looking this up historically, it's usually referred to as the Battle of Edington. But Ethandune, Edington. And this takes up, there are 3 books here about this battle. I'm actually probably going to go through this quite a bit quicker than some of the ones we've done thus far. It's exciting, it's good, it's epic, but there's just so much truth in that first part. Fighting is cool, but there's only so much truth you can get out of it. But let's hop into it.
Yeah, it's the chiefs going back and forth, but I love this phrase as they're going. Follow a light that leaps and spins, follow the fire unfurled, for riseth up against realm and rod, a thing forgotten, a thing downtrod. The last lost giant, even God, is risen against the world. And they go roaring against the Danes.
This is the first stroke. The Christian chiefs do confess themselves before going into battle. They do the sacrament of confession. And then there's this wonderful description about the arrangement of the forces, where you have in the middle, you have on one side Alfred, and on the other side you've got Guthrum. With Alfred, you have Marcus, so the man from Italy, and with Guthrum, you have Ogier, the savage. On the right, you have Eldred, the Anglo-Saxon, and he's against Elf, right, the German guy. And then on the left, you have Colin, the Celt, and he is against Harold, the young man. And the first stroke is this challenge between Harold and Colin.
Harold was the braggart, the boastful one. Like, these men are weak. They're easy to defeat because they are weak already. And Colin, who is just off-the-wall zealot. He's the one who's going to tame the sky and the sea. And they go back and forth. There's a lot of banter here. But Harold threatens him. He draws a bow, and it says that Colin is even faster.
For Colin had not bow nor sling, on a lonely sword leaned he, like Arthur on Excalibur in the battle by the sea. Whirling the one sword round his head, a great wheel in the sun, he sent it splendid through the sky, flying before the shaft could fly. It smote Earl Harold over the eye, and blood began to run. Colin throws his sword. He chucks it at Harold, strikes him in the head, and kills him. And this is the first blow of the battle. And Alfred and everybody else thinks this is fantastic, and they are all rushing to offer him a replacement sword for his heroism. But Alfred claims this honor, and so Colin gets the sword of the king to replace the sword he threw away, and Alfred takes up a battle axe, and away they go.
So it does say that the king, King Guthrum, king of the Danes, is careful. Okay, it says that he's a dread king and fell. He's a war chief, a wise man in the field. Even though he expects to win, you get the impression that the Alfred is greatly outnumbered here still. It says, not less with weighty care did Guthrum draw long lines for pike and shield. So when Alfred's army comes out at dawn, they feel the despair. And as the light rose, it says, despair grew with the day. And I love how each of those chieftains thinks about what was. They have this almost flashback to the things that they've loved and experienced that were good in their life. And I think it's very beautiful. And what else would go through your head before going into battle? One of them confesses, one of them talks about wrongs they've done, and one of them thinks about the time that they wasted. I mean, this to me is so exactly what would happen when you're waiting. But then, yes, Colin just goes to town and earns the king's sword from it. And then Alfred just picks up some axe or something, doesn't care what, because he's handed his sword to a man who's earned it.
And that's the first stroke, the first book of this battle. The next book has a far less cheerful title. This is The Slaying of the Chiefs.
One by one. It's hard.
All the forces engage, and it does walk through them, and it begins with Eldred, kind of like he was the first to be called. And he is just a monster in this battle. He is a chief. But while he moved like a massacre, he murmured as in sleep, and his words were all of low hedges and little fields and sheep. So again, he's thinking of his farm. He's thinking of his home, but he's also fighting mightily here. Eldred is against Elf and the people around Elf. And it says that 6 spears went against Eldred and couldn't get him. They couldn't touch him. But the 7th was the spear of Elf, and it was the one that got him. There's a wonderful story here of where Elf got that spear. 7 spears, and the 7th was wrought as the fairy blades, and given to Elf the minstrel by the monstrous water maids, by them that dwell where luridly lost waters of the Rhine move among roots of nations, being sunken for a sign. Under all graves they murmur and rebel, down to the buried kingdoms creep, and like a lost rain roar and weep o'er the red heavens and hell. Thrice drowned was Elf the minstrel, and washed as dead on sand, and the 3rd time men found him, the spear was in his hand. This is another reason that I think this is an epic poem. There's a few other characteristic flavors of epic poetry. One is the involvement of the divine. The gods take a part. And in this case, we have Mary, who has been the representation of that. But the other, this is another one, where here you have basically the demonic forces taking a hand. This is a fairy weapon. This is a magical spear. And it is this that pierces and kills and takes out Eldred.
And a great clamor of Christian men went up in agony, crying, "Fallen is the tower of Wessex that stood beside the sea." And it's the Roman Marcus who brings them back. "Stand like an oak," cried Marcus. "Stand like a Roman wall. Eldred the Good is fallen. Are you too good to fall?" He's turning them back to the fight. Their leader has fallen, and he says, no, we are still fighting. This whole scene is hard because each chief falls one at a time, but the pushback is amazing and the fortitude with which they keep fighting. And it's not just Alfred's chiefs who fall.
Yeah, because the next to fall is Elf. As Marcus holds the line, he takes him out. And so we've got kind of a one down on each side now at this point. Ogier, the one who is cruel, is now attacking Marcus. And the way this is described is it's really pretty funny. And midmost of that rolling field ran Ogier ragingly, lashing at Mark, who turned his blow and brake the helm upon his brow and broke him to his knee. So Mark has knocked him down. Then Ogier heaved over his head his huge round shield of proof. But Mark set one foot on the shield, one on some sundered rock upheeled, and towering above the tossing field, a statue on the roof. He literally stands on top of the shield that the Ogier pulls up, and it's like it's standing on the top of a turtle. He traps him under this shield, and Mark keeps fighting on top of this shield as Ogier is trapped beneath it. It's a funny scene.
I didn't laugh at this one.
Well, it's not funny
fighting.
for long.
I was like, wait, no, because the guy's pinned underneath, but he escapes, and he stabs Marcus in the side.
But hate in the buried Ogier was strong as pain in hell. With bare brute hand from the inside, he burst the shield of brass and hide, and a death stroke to the Roman side set suddenly and well. And the comparison Ogier then makes on this is he talks about, remember when Rome stood on top of the world? It was like that guy on my shield. But I broke free as the world has broken free, and Rome is now done. And so Ogier's message of just hate and killing and death and destruction, he uses this as a model of what just happened.
Well, he was a Roman statue, right? Standing up on this roof, he was this Roman statue that's now fallen. And Ogier says, Rome is now done and forgotten. No one will even remember. That's how done it is, done forever. And he did it.
And things are looking very, very dark for Alfred here. Alfred and Colin are fighting together. They're close hand to hand. Everyone seems to be falling. It says, vainly the sword of Colin and the axe of Alfred plied. The Danes poured in like a brainless plague and knew not when they died. Prince Colin slew a score of them and was stricken to his knees. King Alfred slew a score and 7 and was borne back on a tree.
So Colin and Alfred are fighting, and they're separated. Colin is separated, so they're no more united. And so Colin is away from Alfred when he is killed.
The thorn woods over Ethandune stand stiff as spikes in mail. As to the hot king came at morn, dead Roland on a doubtful horde, seemed unto Alfred lightly borne, the last cry of the gale. And so Alfred is now without all his chiefs. And this takes us to Book 7, Ethandune, the last charge.
Suddenly, it's about a child playing on the white horse down. An idle child alone played some small game through hours that pass, and patiently would pluck the grass, patiently push the stone. Remember how I said you had to maintain the horse for it to be clean? And this child is just playing among the stones, picking back the weeds, piling up the stones, as a kid would do. And it parallels to Alfred doing the task in front of him.
It also associates Alfred with the child, because G.K. Chesterton here describes kind of the fighting styles of the chiefs and of Alfred. And this was the might of Alfred at the ending of the way, that of such smiters, wise or wild, he was least distance from the child, piling the stones all day. For Eldred fought like a frank hunter that killeth and goeth home, and Mark had fought because all arms rang like the name of Rome. And Colin fought with a double mind, moody and madly gay, but Alfred fought as gravely as a good child at play. He saw wheels break and work run back, and all things as they were, and his heart was orbed like victory and simple like despair. Therefore is Mark forgotten, that was wise with his tongue and brave, and the cairn over Colin crumbled, and the cross on Eldred's grave. Their great souls went on a wind away, and they have not a tale or tomb. And Alfred, born in wantage, rules England till the doom. That idea of the childishness of him. I mean, I love that image, right? You build up a bunch of blocks as a kid and they all fall over. Well, I'm going to build them again. You just keep doing it. And it's always a game. It's this play, this excitement. And that is very Chestertonian.
Here, Alfred takes up a horn. He says, he took his ivory horn unslung and smiled, but not in scorn. Endeth the battle of Ethandune with the blowing of a horn. And Alfred inspires the men that are left. He references the things that are worth fighting for, because they are scattered. Their chieftains have all been killed. He says, death is a better ale to drink, and by all the stars of Christ that sink, the Danes shall drink with me. While man remains, great war remains. Now is a war of men. The men that tear the furrows, the men that fell the trees. When all their lords be lost and dead, the bondsmen of the earth shall tread, the tyrants of the seas. It says the lords are done, but now it's your turn.
So he's inspiring them for the end of the battle. The king looked up, and what he saw was a great light like death. For Our Lady stood on the standard's rent, as lonely and as innocent as when between white walls she went, and the lilies of Nazareth. One instant in a still light he saw Our Lady then. Her dress was soft as western sky, and she was a queen most womanly, but she was a queen of men. Over the iron forest he saw Our Lady stand. Her eyes were sad without an art, and 7 swords were in her heart, but one was in her hand.
And this vision of the lady is what starts the last charge. And it says that the last charge went blindly, and all too lost for fear. The Danes closed round a roaring ring, and 20 clubs rose o'er the king. 4 Danes hewed at him, hollowing, and Ogier of the stone and sling drove at him with a spear. But the Danes were wild with laughter, and the great spear swung wide. The point stuck to a straggling tree, and either host cried suddenly as Alfred leapt aside.
Short time had shaggy Ogier to pull his lance in line. He knew King Alfred's axe on high. He heard it rushing through the sky. He cowered beneath it with a cry. It split him to the spine. And Alfred sprang over him dead and blew the battle sign.
Then bursting all and blasting came Christendom like death. Kicked from such catapults of will, the staves shiver, the barrels spill, the wagons waver and crash and kill the wagoners beneath. The tide has turned. This is one of those, I did not see that coming. That happens throughout this. He's slapped by this peasant woman. The tide turns on this battle that can't be won. I mean, it's full of these twists.
The Mother of God goes over them, walking on wind and flame, and the storm cloud drifts from city and dale, and the white horse stamps in the white horse vale, and we all shall yet drink Christian ale in the village of our name. And people gather round him now, because Colin fell, the chiefs fell, but the people didn't all fell. It says, for the dregs of Colin's company lost down the other road, had gathered and grown and heard the din, and with wild yells came pouring in, naked as their old British kin and bright with blood for woad. And so the forces are just turning. And what really happened in the battle here, is my understanding, is that Alfred formed an Anglo-Saxon shield wall. It's a very classic maneuver, and the Vikings broke against it. And so he broke against the shield wall, and then he was able to chase them down. And then what ended up happening was Guthrum ended up running actually into a city which was besieged until finally it fell. And here we have the triumph of Alfred. And this last great line, King Guthrum was a great lord and higher than his gods. He put the popes to laughter. He chid the saints with rods. He took this hollow world of ours for a cup to hold his wine. In the parting of the woodways there came to him a sign. In Wessex in the forest, in the breaking of the spears, we set a sign on Guthrum to blaze 1,000 years. Where the high saddles jostle and the horsetails tossed, there rose to the birds flying a roar of dead and dying, and deafness and strong crying. We signed him with the cross. Far out to the winding river, the blood ran down for days, when we put the cross on Guthrum in the parting of the ways. So what happened again historically was Guthrum surrendered, and as part of the surrender, he agreed to be baptized. King Alfred was his godfather.
Huh.
This is politics of Anglo-Saxon England.
I have nothing instructive to say to that. I'm not sure how I feel about forced baptism.
Well, but I don't think it is forced baptism in this setting. Remember, Guthrum, the way he's portrayed in this story, is a hopeless king. He's just waiting for death. But he's a learned man. He's an intelligent man. And I think the way Chesterton portrays it is he saw something greater and higher. He was defeated. All his gods were defeated by Alfred and this mob. And so I think that there is something to it. I don't think it was a forced conversion. It was part of the surrender, but I think that there's hope in that.
Fair. Well, the last book here is called The Scouring of the Horse. And so it's strange and different that this book doesn't end, this ballad doesn't end with the battle. That wasn't the end of it. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story is King Alfred at peace. In the years of the peace of Wessex, when the good king sat at home, years following on that bloody boon, when she that stands above the moon stood above death at Ethandune and saw his kingdom come.
And we're back to a king in an orchard with the apples around him. The king sat in his orchard among apples green and red, with the little book in his bosom and the sunshine on his head. And he gathered the songs of simple men that swing with helm and hod, and the alms he gave as a Christian, like a river alive with fishes ran. And he made gifts to a beggar man as to a wandering god. And he gat good laws of the ancient kings like treasure out of the tombs. And many a thief in thorny nook or noble in sea-stained turret shook for the opening of his iron book and the gathering of the dooms.
So in his time of peace, as he sits among the apple trees, there are so many references to apples in this. And to me, they're just so homely. They are peace and comfort and plain. You know, it is a very solid kind of peace and comfort. It's not some grandiose castle and gold and treasure, nothing like that. It is the goodness, the purity of an apple. But here, as you said, Alfred is generous. He's making good laws. It says that travel commences and people travel wide. Love that Prester John is mentioned, by the way, far to the east. But people are coming and going. And eventually, as all these embassies come and go, others like, why don't we expand? There's more land out there. Why aren't we fighting? Why don't we take it? And Alfred in the orchard, among apples green and red, with the little book in his bosom, looked at green leaves and said, when all philosophy shall fail, this word alone shall fit, that a sage feels too small for life, and a fool too large for it. Asia and all imperial plains are too little for a fool, but for one man whose eyes can see, the little island of Athelney is too large a land to rule.
He set his limits. The other thing he does, and it fell in the days of Alfred, in the days of his repose, that as old customs in his sight were a straight road and a steady light, he bade them keep the white horse white as the first plume of the snows. This goes back to what you were saying about when he noticed the white horse not white, when the Vikings were there coming by and it was all muck and gray. This is going to be a symbol. The work to keep it pure, the work to keep it clean. And he engages in that and makes it a rule.
And I think how Chesterton is that? The idea that you have to work for good. You have to work to maintain good and health and cleanliness. These things require diligence and maintenance ongoing, because that overgrowth, that dirt, that the weeds that overrun, that's easy. That's natural. That's what just happens. But it's not what we're called to do. It's not what Alfred was called to do. He was called to do hard things, but good things. And good things came of it.
And what's interesting is the hard things aren't done.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Danes come back. And all his courtiers and the young men are complaining about this, complaining that God has left them. What's going on? Why is this happening? Why are they returning? But Alfred's answer to this is very simple, and it's what you just said. Then Alfred smiled, and the smile of him was like the sun for power. But he only pointed, bade them heed, those peasants of the Berkshire breed, who plucked the old horse of the weed, as they pluck it to this hour. The weeds always come back. The hard things always come back. That shouldn't surprise any of us. Shouldn't surprise them. What you then do is you go weed it. You then go do the work once more. Chesterton believed fully, and I think he's 1,000% right, that the Christian life is an adventure. It's a challenge. It's exciting. Far more exciting than those gods that are sad. And this is an example of it.
I like this, along those lines. Will you part with the weeds forever, or show daisies to the door? Or will you bid the bold grass go and return no more? And he keeps going, he says, and though skies alter and empires melt, this word shall still be true. If we would have the horse of old, scour ye the horse anew. And at the end of this line, he says, if ye not scour well, red rush shall grow on God's great bell and grass in the streets of God. You have to continue the work. You have to keep the watch. You have to continually remind yourself and refresh yourself on what is true, what is good, and where your work is. You know, what are you doing to uphold that? Because he says that they're going to come back again, but that one day it's not going to be a battle.
They shall come mild as monkish clerks, with many a scroll and pen. And backward shall ye turn and gaze, desiring one of Alfred's days, when pagans still were men. It's not always going to be fighting. You know what you're fighting against. It's pretty easy if somebody comes at you with a sword to know, oh, bad guy, I need to fight against this. But the monkish clerks, those who come in with philosophy and seductive words, that's what you really have to be on guard against.
Yeah, there's so many good lines. It says, they shall not come with warships, they shall not waste with brands, but books be all their eating and ink be on their hands. But yeah, the idea of philosophies, and he identifies. So King Alfred here, this fight is coming again, but here he gives warning of how you identify. How will you know? when it's wrong, when it's not the thing you should be working on, when it's not keeping things clean. It says, by this sign you shall know them, that they ruin and make dark. He puts a lot more words to it, but for me, that summed it up, where it's that bleakness, those old sad gods. It's those ideas and philosophies that tear down, that make dark. Those aren't right. That's what you got to be on the lookout for.
King Alfred is old now, but he's still doing the work and he's still king. And he goes out against this most recent incursion of the Danes. And the way this ends, that away on the widening river in the eastern plains for crowns, stood up in the pale purple sky one turret of smoke like ivory, and the smoke changed and the wind went by, and the king took London town. So even in his age, he's victorious. And it's so good.
It is so good. Yeah, at Thundun, where the tide changed, here at the end, the wind changed. The wind went by. And again, I did not see that coming.
Well, there you have it, friends. That is The Battle of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton, and I love it more every time I read it. I actually really doubted my ability to do this podcast because I cry. I mean, I just pull out lines of this to read, and I start weeping. And so the fact that I got through it at all is a minor miracle, but I'm so glad we did because I love this work.
So I said at the beginning, a couple times actually, that this was a tragedy, but it isn't. I read it with such hope coming out of it and this encouragement to scour the white horse anew. And whatever that means in your own life, I find it inspirational and wonderful. And the historical, I mean, what a great way to put someone into a historical setting, someone real, and then take what was told best about them, these wonderful ideals about them, and take such lessons from it. I think it's one of Chesterton's best.
It is my favorite. It is truly my favorite. But I thought it might be interesting to turn to my favorite Anglo-Saxon scholar and see what he thinks about it. Of course, I'm referring to Professor J.R.R. Tolkien. If anybody knew the Anglo-Saxon world, it is he. For what is the other term for Anglo-Saxon? Old English. And this is what that man loved and what he studied. And there's a letter he wrote to his son Christopher in September of 1944. And this is great, and I'm just going to read it. Priscilla, that's Tolkien's daughter, has been wading through the Ballad of the White Horse for the last many nights, and my efforts to explain the obscurer parts to her convince me that it is not as good as I thought. The ending is absurd. The brilliant smash and glitter of the words and phrases, when they come off and are not mere loud colors, cannot disguise the fact that GKC knew nothing whatever about the North, heathen, or Christian. That wasn't what I was expecting. But
well, geez.
I think we've already addressed some of these concerns, though. G.K. Chesterton was not trying to write history, but I do love Tolkien's phrase here, the brilliant smash and glitter of the words and phrases. That is one of the best descriptions of the way Chesterton writes that I've ever come across. And with that, we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.